A few months ago, I met a guy on Tinder who I'll call Jack. We didn't talk much at first. Our conversations were short, and to be honest, I didn't take anything he said seriously. Most of the guys I talked to on Tinder didn't care much about who I was or what I was doing in life. Jack, as I think most people know, was just like everyone else. I didn't feel any different, and I had never been on a date, or at least a serious date, from Tinder. I came to the conclusion that I really needed to meet men. I was tired of using these dating apps all the time and having no success. Men don't help themselves. The messages they send are creepily constructed, as if I'm going to do something illegal or be blatantly rude if I meet them. They begged me to meet them, asked me to take pictures of them, and all sorts of creepy stuff, and don't even get me started on teenagers' use of Snapchat. Anyway, after seeing Jack for a couple of weeks, I was pretty confused about what he wanted. He was different from other guys. At first, all we did was chat, and then it got more and more serious. Jack started to tell me about his family, his hobbies, everything he did, and he treated me like a friend instead of being creepy like other guys. We talked for a while, and finally Jack asked me out. I hesitated and ignored him for a few days, but I managed to work up the courage. I only live once, and what's the point of using Tinder if I'm never going to meet anyone? I finally agreed. Jack asked me out to dinner. I'd never been asked out to dinner in my life. My heart was pounding. I remember it like it was yesterday. The night of the date, Jack showed up at the end of my street. I was careful not to give him my exact address, so I told him that there were a couple of streets at the end of my road. I live in a strange area where directions don't make sense, so what I just said probably just confused and disoriented you. Jack immediately waved to me from his car. The first thing I noticed when I got to his car was that he looked nothing like his picture on Tinder. Not in a bad way, but in a good way. It must be an old photo or a photo from a few years ago. This man looked much more mature, much more attractive and different. He was sexy, I'd admit it, but I was still nervous about getting into his car. I hesitantly got in, setting my bag at my feet and closing the door slightly, trying not to disturb him. It wasn't a very nice car, but he was respectful and polite. He drove us to a restaurant 10 or 15 minutes away. We pulled into the parking lot and Jack paid for parking. Once out of the parking lot, we walked the short distance to the restaurant. It wasn't far from the parking lot to the restaurant, about 2 blocks. In order to drive out of the parking lot, we had to prove that we were using the restaurant. It was pretty creepy. The date was very good. The food was okay, but the shrimp was pretty small. Overall, I think I was able to find common ground with Jack. He told me a lot about his life, games, different sports, his family, the fact that he has a nephew. He seemed to have a pretty good outlook on life, and overall I didn't mind just sitting and listening to him. Let me put it this way. When the date was over, I offered to pay half, but Jack insisted on paying full price. A true gentleman. After thanking the waiters, we finally left the restaurant. In the parking lot, we flirted a bit. I have to admit, saying this makes me look like a dirty woman. But the truth is, I liked him. And in that moment, I loved him. When we got back to my house, at the end of my street, I let him drop me off at the same spot. I waved goodbye, and he drove away. The most unpleasant thing about the encounter was that the man told me everything about his life except his address. His full name, parents, grandparents, nieces, nephews, cousins, even the soccer club he is currently a member of. I really enjoy following him. I got home and called my friend and asked if I could come to her house because we like to do weird things to investigate people. He was a few minutes walk away on the other side of the neighborhood, so I went to his house. When I got there, he opened his laptop and we started searching for the man's name. That's when the results of the Google search came up. The man had been charged with 8 counts of breaking and entering at night. He had broken into people's homes and stolen their belongings. He was serving a suspended sentence of 3 to 1 year and had been tried 8 times for the same offense. I fell head over heels in love with Jack, but I don't think it was worth pursuing him because I didn't like the idea of dating a guy who stole people's stuff. I guess the moral of the story is that you never know who you're going to meet. Jack seemed to me a calm, respectful, and polite man. Everything about the way he treated me, from the language he used to his demeanor, seemed sincere. But to think that behind the scenes, one night, he went out and tried to rob me in my own home. I would never have thought of that. For the benefit of those who commented below, it's not that I somehow made this up. The fact is that when I Googled him, his picture came up next to the sentence. So unless there is a similar one with exactly the same name, it wasn't my fault. He kept messaging me on Tinder for a while until I matched him. I haven't heard from him since then. For a while I was a bit creeped out. I thought he was just waiting for me to go back to where he put me. He would finally see me. But fortunately that never happened. That's what happened when I dated a criminal. It's not fun, it's not cool. It might look sexy in the moment, but that guy stole from an old man. There's nothing cool about that. In a small town in the US, a mother obsessed with finding a partner for her son. Jason created a fake Tinder profile. Jason was a modest young man with unusual tastes. Determined to solve this problem, his mother began asking girls out on dates for him with false promises. A college student named Lisa, looking for love, came across Jason's profile and was intrigued by his conversation. She agreed to meet him. When Lisa arrived at a house far from the address, Jason's mother greeted her with a vague smile. Lisa was shown to Jason's room, but his mother locked the door on some pretext, leaving her and her son alone. The room was strangely constructed and looked more like the set of a horror movie than a bedroom. Jason approached Lisa with a blank expression on his face. In a few minutes, the scene turned into a nightmare. Inspired by the horror movies he longed to see, Jason brought out his dark side. He showed Lisa the torture device and talked excitedly about staging the horrific scene. Terrified, Lisa realized she had to run for her life. Gathering her courage, Lisa threw herself out of the window and fell painfully into the garden below. Injured but determined to survive, Lisa desperately ran down the street in search of help. Jason and her mother chased after her and refused to explain what had happened. Fortunately, a passing truck driver noticed the incident. Seeing the danger, he put Lisa in the truck and drove her away from the threat. Lisa was still in shock, but managed to tell the driver what had happened to her, and he took her straight to the nearest police station. The police officers checked the address Lisa had given them and found no one at home. Jason and his mother were nowhere to be seen and seemed to have disappeared without a trace. Further investigation revealed that the house was rented in the name of a non-existent person. Lisa's story became an unsolved mystery. The community was shaken by the possibility that Jason and his mother were still at large and looking for new victims.